From the very start, Layla knew her home was not like others. She was born in a small neighborhood in Atlanta, where families looked out for each other, and mothers were supposed to be the backbone of the home. But in Layla's case, her mother, Brenda, was present in body but absent in spirit. When neighbors asked, "Is that your daughter?" "She looks so much like you," Brenda would force a dry laugh and shake her head. Sometimes she would even say, "No, she just lives with me." Those words cut Layla deeply. She would stand behind the door, hearing every syllable, and the pain would settle in her chest like fire. At school, Layla saw the difference. Friends had mothers who packed them lunch, braided their hair, or came for school programs. When it was Layla's turn, her mother never showed up. Teachers would ask, "Layla, where's your mom?" She would fake a smile and whisper, "She's busy." Inside, she wished she could disappear. Her father, Marcus, had left when she was only 2 years old. All she knew about him were the angry rants Brenda threw around the house. "You're the reason he walked away. You ruined my life," Brenda would spit, her eyes full of bitterness. Layla couldn't understand. How could a little child be the reason her father abandoned them? That was the start of her silent war, the war of living under the roof of a woman who gave birth to her but refused to call her daughter. Layla had a younger brother, Chris. Unlike her, he was the light of Brenda's eyes. Everything Chris wanted, Brenda provided. She ironed his school uniform, cooked his favorite meals, and called him my baby boy. When Chris came home with a simple drawing from school, Brenda clapped and hung it on the wall. But when Layla came home with an award for being top in her class, Brenda tossed it aside and muttered, "Go put it somewhere, don't disturb me." Chris noticed it too, but he was too young to understand why his sister was treated differently. Sometimes he would whisper, "Layla, why doesn't Mom like you?" But Layla would shrug, hiding her tears. The neighborhood also noticed the favoritism. Miss Johnson, their next-door neighbor, once pulled Brenda aside and said, "Brenda, you've got 2 children. Don't pour all your love into one and starve the other." Brenda rolled her eyes and snapped, "You don't know what you're talking about. That girl isn't mine the way you think she is." Those words haunted Layla. She began to question her own existence. If her mother kept saying she wasn't hers, then who was she? As Layla grew into her teenage years, the denial became heavier. Brenda didn't hide it anymore. At family gatherings, when relatives asked, "Brenda, your daughter is so beautiful," Brenda would quickly interrupt, "That's not my daughter." "Don't say that." Layla's heart broke each time. She wanted to scream, "But you gave birth to me." Yet, the fear of rejection silenced her voice. She began to search for answers. One night, she sneaked into Brenda's room and went through old photo albums. She saw baby pictures of Chris, held with pride in Brenda's arms. But for her own baby pictures, there were none. It was as if she had been erased from her own history. The only clue she found was a folded letter tucked inside a box. It was from her grandmother, and it read, "Brenda, no matter what happened, she is still your blood. Don't deny her. One day you'll regret it." Layla held the letter close to her chest. Her grandmother's words were the first sign that she truly belonged to Brenda. But if that was true, why did her mother hate her so much? That night, for the first time, Layla whispered to herself in the dark, "One day, I will find out why my mother denies me." The older Layla grew, the more obvious her loneliness became. At school, she was the quiet girl in the back of the classroom, the one who always had neat homework but never had a mother show up on parent-teacher conference days. Teachers noticed. One day, her math teacher, Mr. Carter, knelt beside her desk and asked gently, "Layla, is everything okay at home?" She forced a smile and nodded. But inside, she was screaming. At home, Chris played video games in the living room with Brenda cheering him on. Layla, meanwhile, was often in her room, reading books she borrowed from the library. Books became her escape. In novels, mothers hugged their daughters, celebrated their birthdays, and called them my baby. Layla imagined herself in those stories, living a life that wasn't hers. When Brenda cooked, she set Chris's plate first, with the biggest portion of chicken or fish. Layla got whatever was left. On days when there wasn't enough food, Brenda would shrug and say, "Chris needs to eat. You'll be fine." One Saturday afternoon, while sweeping the kitchen, Layla gathered the courage to ask, "Mom, why don't you treat me the way you treat Chris?" Brenda froze for a moment, then turned sharply. "Because you are not really my child the way he is," she muttered. Then she stormed out, leaving Layla with trembling hands and unanswered questions. The neighborhood wasn't blind to what was happening. Old Miss Johnson, who always sat on her porch, often called out to Layla, "Baby girl, come get some cookies. Don't let nobody make you feel less." She tried to comfort her, but the pain was too deep for sugar and kind words to heal. Other kids whispered too. Some classmates mocked, "Your mama don't even claim you." Layla fought tears, but sometimes she went home and cried into her pillow. She wondered how the world knew about her mother's denial when she, the one living it, couldn't even make sense of it. Rumors spread that Brenda had once been in love with a man who wasn't Marcus, and that Layla looked too much like him. People said Brenda saw her daughter as a reminder of her own mistakes. Whether it was true or not, the whispers gave Layla more questions than answers. One evening, Layla overheard Brenda arguing on the phone with her sister. "Don't tell her anything, Clara. I don't care how old she gets. She doesn't need to know. I never wanted her in the first place." The words pierced Layla's heart. She pressed her ear to the wall, her breath shaky. For the first time, she realized her mother's denial wasn't about her actions. It was about something buried deep in Brenda's past. Layla's only true comfort came from her grandmother, Ruthie. Every summer, Brenda sent Layla to stay with her in South Carolina. Unlike Brenda, Grandma Ruthie treated her like gold. She would hug her tightly and say, "Baby girl, don't you ever think you're less than anybody. You are mine, and I see you." Grandma Ruthie cooked big pots of collard greens, cornbread, and fried chicken, and she always made sure Layla had the biggest piece. She listened when Layla talked about school, her dreams, and her pain. Sometimes, she would even slip into conversations about Brenda. "Your mama, she went through things. She lost herself. But that ain't your fault, Layla. Don't carry her burden as your own." But whenever Layla pressed for details, Grandma Ruthie grew quiet. She would shake her head and say, "One day the truth will come out. Until then, hold your head high." Those summers with her grandmother saved Layla. They reminded her she wasn't invisible. But returning home to Brenda always felt like being thrown back into a storm after a brief moment of sunshine. By the time Layla was 16, she could no longer hide her pain. One evening, after Brenda openly called her that girl in front of Chris, Layla snapped. "Why do you hate me so much? Why do you deny me? I'm your daughter," she shouted, her voice shaking with years of pent-up anger. Brenda turned, her eyes blazing. "Don't you ever raise your voice at me. You're nothing but a mistake, Layla. A mistake I was forced to carry." Chris froze, his spoon dropping from his hand. The house went silent, except for Layla's sobs. She ran to her room, slammed the door, and cried until her body ached. For the first time, Chris saw the truth with his own eyes. He knocked softly on her door and whispered, "Layla, I'm sorry. I didn't know it was this bad." But apologies couldn't heal the wound. That night, Layla realized her mother might never love her the way she wanted. In high school, Layla found a friend who became her lifeline, Jasmine. Jasmine was loud, funny, and full of life. She noticed the sadness in Layla's eyes and refused to let her hide behind fake smiles. One day at lunch, Jasmine asked, "Why do you always look like you're carrying the world on your shoulders?" Layla hesitated but finally told her the truth. Jasmine listened without judgment and said firmly, "Girl, Your mama's loss doesn't define you. You are enough. You're more than enough. Those words stuck with Layla. For the first time, someone outside her family told her she was worth something. Jasmine invited her to family dinners, where Layla watched her parents laugh and pray together. It was bittersweet. She loved the warmth, but it also reminded her of what she lacked at home. Still, Jasmine's friendship gave her strength to keep going. Curiosity burned in Layla's heart. She needed to know the truth about why Brenda denied her. One afternoon, while Brenda was at work, she sneaked into her mother's room again. This time, she found a hidden envelope inside the dresser. It contained old letters and a photograph of a man she had never seen before. The man had the same eyes as hers, the same crooked smile. The letters were signed, "With love, Samuel." Her hands trembled as she read one of them. "Brenda, I will always love you. I hope one day we can raise our child together." Child. The word leaped from the page. Could Samuel be her real father? Was this the reason Brenda hated her, that she was a reminder of a man Brenda had lost or abandoned? When Brenda came home, Layla confronted her. "Who is Samuel? Why did you hide this from me?" Brenda's face drained of color. For the first time, she was speechless. That night, Brenda finally broke. She sat on the couch, her hands shaking, her voice low. "Samuel was the man I loved before Marcus. You were his child. But he left me when he found out I was pregnant. I married Marcus later, and when he discovered you weren't his, he walked out too. That's why I couldn't look at you. You ruined everything for me." The words sliced through Layla like knives. She wanted to scream that none of it was her fault, that she never asked to be born. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "So all this time, you punished me for something I had no control over?" Brenda turned away, unable to answer. Layla felt a mix of pain and relief. At least now she knew the truth. But knowing it didn't erase the years of denial, the scars etched into her soul. She made a silent promise to herself. I may not have my mother's love, but I will not let her denial define me. I will create my own story. After the truth came out, the house grew heavy with silence. Brenda barely looked at Layla, and when she did, her eyes carried shame more than anger. Chris, confused and hurt, tried to treat his sister better, but the damage had already been done. Layla stayed in her room most days, staring at the photo of Samuel. She wanted to find him, to ask why he abandoned her. But she didn't even know if he was alive. When she asked Brenda for answers, Brenda snapped, "Don't go looking for him. He left us. Forget about him." But how could she forget? Every time Layla looked in the mirror, she saw Samuel's face staring back at her. One evening, Layla sneaked out with a letter she had found. She sat under the streetlight outside, reading them one by one. They told a story of love between Brenda and Samuel, late-night drives, dreams of a family, and promises of forever. But the last letter ended abruptly. "Brenda, I can't do this. I'm not ready for a child. Forgive me." Tears dropped on the paper. For the first time, Layla felt connected to the man she had never met. He wasn't just a stranger, he was her blood. And yet, he too had denied her. That night, Layla decided she would not live her life begging for love from people who turned away. Layla threw herself into schoolwork. She joined the debate team, wrote essays that won competitions, and worked part-time at a diner to save money. Each achievement fueled her silent rebellion against her mother's rejection. One day, after winning a statewide essay contest, her name appeared in the local newspaper. Miss Johnson, the neighbor, waved the paper proudly. "Look at you, baby girl. You're going places." But when Brenda saw it, she muttered coldly, "That doesn't change anything." Layla swallowed the pain. She no longer expected approval from Brenda. Instead, she began to build her own path to success, step by step. Chris grew older and began to question Brenda's behavior. He loved his mother, but he could no longer ignore how she treated his sister. One night, he confronted her. "Mom, why do you treat Layla like she's less? She's my sister. She's family." Brenda sighed, rubbing her forehead. "You wouldn't understand, Chris." But Chris pressed on. "No, I do understand. You're punishing her for something she had no control over. That's wrong." Brenda's lips tightened. For once, she had no quick comeback. Chris walked away, shaking his head. From that day forward, he stood by Layla more openly, even defending her when Brenda tried to dismiss her achievements. Jasmine's family became Layla's second home. Jasmine's mother, Angela, often welcomed her with open arms. "Layla, you're like another daughter to me," she said while serving her warm plates of food. At their table, Layla felt a love she had never known. Family prayers before meals, laughter about small things, hugs for no reason. She cherished those moments but also grieved silently for the life she was denied. Angela once pulled her aside and said softly, "Baby, sometimes the people who bring us into the world are the very ones who can't love us right. But that doesn't mean you're unworthy of love." Those words sank deep into Layla's heart, becoming a seed of healing. Senior year of high school arrived. Layla applied to colleges, determined to escape the walls of Brenda's house. When the acceptance letters began to roll in, she cried tears of joy. Her top choice, Howard University, sent her a scholarship offer. When she told Brenda, hoping for a small spark of pride, Brenda only said, "Do whatever you want. Just don't expect me to help." But Chris hugged her tight. "I'm proud of you, sis. You're going to make it big." For the first time, Layla saw a clear door opening into a future that belonged to her alone. On the day she left for college, Layla packed her bags quietly. Brenda didn't come out of her room to say goodbye. Only Chris stood at the door, helping her load her things into Jasmine's car. "Call me when you get there," he said, his eyes misty. Layla hugged him. "Take care of yourself, little brother. And don't let her break you." As the car pulled away, Layla looked out the window one last time. She realized Brenda might never give her the love she craved, but she was finally free to write her own story. College was a new world. Layla met people who valued her for her intelligence, her drive, and her resilience. Professors praised her work, classmates admired her dedication, and slowly, she began to believe in her own worth. But late at night, when the dorm was quiet, she sometimes cried into her pillow. The wounds of her mother's denial didn't heal overnight. She still wondered about Samuel. Did he ever think of her? Did he regret leaving? She decided that one day she would search for him. But first, she needed to build herself into the woman she was destined to become. 2 years later, Layla returned home for a short visit. She had grown stronger, more confident, carrying herself with a quiet dignity. Chris welcomed her warmly, but Brenda sat on the couch, her arms crossed. For the first time, Layla didn't shrink under her mother's stare. She looked her straight in the eyes and said calmly, "I know you may never love me, but I'm not broken anymore. I am your daughter, whether you claim me or not." Brenda looked away, her face tightening. She didn't respond. But something flickered in her eyes. Guilt, maybe even regret. By the time Layla turned 21, she fully understood something her grandmother and Angela had always told her. Family isn't only about blood, it's about love, care, and respect. She built her own family out of the people who truly valued her. Chris, Jasmine, Angela, and a circle of friends who treated her like a sister. Her mother's denial had once defined her life, but now it fueled her determination. She promised herself she would never deny love to anyone who needed it. And though she still carried the scars, Layla had begun to heal. She was no longer the little girl waiting for her mother's approval. She was a woman, standing tall, carving her place in the work. Layla couldn't ignore the emptiness left by Samuel, the man Brenda had called her father. At 21, She finally began searching for him. She wrote letters, looked through public records, and even reached out to a cousin she barely knew. It wasn't easy, but something inside her needed closure. One evening, Chris called and said, "I overheard Mom talking on the phone with Aunt Clara. Samuel might be in Chicago." Layla's heart raced. For years she had wondered if he was alive, if he remembered her. Now, there was a chance she could find out. She booked a bus ticket, carrying the faded photo she had found in Brenda's drawer. In Chicago, Layla knocked on the door of a small apartment. A man with graying hair and tired eyes opened the door. He looked at her with shock, the same shock she felt staring at him. His eyes were hers. "Samuel?" she asked, her voice trembling. The man swallowed hard. You must be Layla." For a moment, silence hung heavy between them. Then tears streamed down her face. "Why did you leave me?" she whispered. Samuel bowed his head. "I was young, scared, and selfish. I thought I wasn't ready to be a father. But not a day goes by that I don't regret it." Layla didn't know whether to hug him or hit him. All she knew was that the missing piece of her story was finally standing in front of her. They sat inside his modest apartment, where Samuel poured out his regrets. "I followed your life from a distance when I could," he admitted. "I knew Brenda would never forgive me, so I stayed away. But I always prayed you'd grow strong." Layla clenched her fists. "Your prayers didn't stop me from crying myself to sleep. They didn't stop my mother from denying me." Samuel's eyes filled with tears. "You're right. I failed you. But if you'll allow me, I want to know you now. I want to try." Layla's heart was torn. Part of her longed for his love. Another part feared being abandoned again. She left his apartment that night with mixed emotions, relieved she had answers, but unsure if she could ever forgive. Returning to Atlanta, Layla felt changed. She had looked into the eyes of the man who denied her before she was even born. Now, she had to face the woman who raised her but never embraced her. Chris met her at the bus stop. "So, did you find him?" Layla nodded slowly. "Yes, but knowing the truth doesn't erase the pain." Chris put an arm around her. "You don't have to erase it. Just learn how to live past it." His words struck her deeply. Maybe healing wasn't about forgetting. It was about moving forward in spite of the scars. One night, Layla confronted Brenda. She placed the photo of Samuel on the table and looked her mother straight in the eyes. "I found him. He's alive. He regrets leaving. But I need to ask you, why did you take your anger out on me? Why deny me when I needed you most?" Brenda froze, her lips trembling. For years, she had hidden behind anger, but now her daughter's strength left her with nowhere to run. Finally, Brenda whispered, "Because every time I looked at you, I saw him. And I hated myself for loving a man who abandoned me. I hated the reminder." Layla's eyes filled with tears. "You punished me for your heartbreak. You denied your own child because of your pain." Brenda wept quietly, but Layla didn't stay to console her. For the first time, she realized her mother's wounds weren't hers to carry. Layla leaned on her support system more than ever. Jasmine, her friend, remained a steady rock. Angela, Jasmine's mother, kept reminding her, "Healing takes time, baby. Don't rush it." At Howard, Layla found professors who pushed her to write her story. She began journaling late at night, pouring out every detail of her childhood. What started as private writing slowly turned into essays that caught the attention of campus organizations. She was invited to speak at a youth event, sharing her story of denial, survival, and resilience. To her surprise, people cried as she spoke, some even standing to clap. For the first time, Layla realized her pain had purpose. Meanwhile, Chris struggled under Brenda's shadow. Though she favored him, he hated seeing how she treated Layla. One night, he shouted at his mother, I can't be your excuse for hurting her. You can love me and still love her too." Brenda was stunned. She had always believed Chris would defend her choices, but instead, he defended his sister. That night, Chris called Layla. "Sis, I told her the truth. I told her she can't erase you. I'm tired of watching you suffer." For the first time, Layla didn't feel completely alone in her family. Months later, Brenda showed up unannounced at Howard. She sat nervously in the cafeteria while Layla approached cautiously. "Why are you here?" Layla asked flatly. Brenda's eyes softened. "Because I can't run from this anymore. I denied you for too long. I don't know if I can ever make it right, but I want to try." Layla's chest tightened. She wanted to believe her, but trust wasn't built in one conversation. You can't just say sorry and erase years of pain. Brenda nodded. "I know, but I'm ready to start with one step, if you'll let me." Forgiveness didn't come easily. Layla battled resentment, replaying every cruel word Brenda had spoken over the years. But she also remembered her grandmother's wisdom. Holding hate in your heart is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Slowly, she began to allow small conversations with her mother. They weren't deep, but they were something. Brenda sent her messages like, "I saw your article. I'm proud." Simple words, but words Layla had longed to hear. It wasn't full healing, but it was a beginning. Months later, Samuel reached out again. His health was failing, and he wanted to see Layla one last time. She traveled back to Chicago, nervous and unsure. When she walked into his apartment, he was lying in bed, weaker than before. He reached for her hand. "I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I want you to know, you were never unwanted. I was just too broken to stay." Tears streamed down Layla's face. She whispered, "I can't forget what you did. But I don't want to carry hate either. I forgive you." Samuel smiled faintly, tears rolling down his cheeks. 2 weeks later, he passed away. Samuel's death hit Layla harder than she expected. She hadn't known him long, but he was part of her story. She attended his funeral, meeting half-siblings she never knew existed. They welcomed her, calling her sister, and for the first time, she felt connected to a family tree larger than her pain. As she stood at his grave, she whispered, "I forgive you. Rest now." With those words, she felt a release, a weight lifting from her shoulders. Back at Howard, Layla turned her journal entries into a manuscript. She shared it with one of her professors, who encouraged her to publish. Soon, her story was circulating among young people who also felt denied, unloved, or invisible. She was invited to speak at conferences, churches, and schools. Each time, she stood tall and declared, "Your worth is not defined by who denies you. You are enough." Her words became healing for others, and in the process, healing for herself. Watching her daughter grow into a woman of influence, Brenda was forced to face herself. For years, she had blamed Layla for Samuel, for Marcus, for everything. But now she saw that Layla was not her curse. She was her strength. One Sunday, Brenda showed up at church and publicly confessed, "I denied my own child. But through her strength, I've learned that love is stronger than pain." It was the beginning of her transformation. She still had much to learn, but for the first time, she was willing to change. One evening, Brenda sat across from Layla, tears in her eyes. "I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I need to say this, I'm sorry. I was broken, and I let my pain turn into hate. You didn't ruin my life. You gave me a chance to see my own weakness." Layla's heart pounded. She had dreamed of these words her whole life. Slowly, she reached across the table and held her mother's hand. "I can't erase the past, but I can choose not to live in it. I forgive you, Mom." Both women wept, holding each other for the first time in decades. Years later, Layla became a published author and motivational speaker. She stood before thousands, telling her story of denial, discovery, and healing. Chris sat in the audience, clapping the loudest. Brenda, older and humbler, sat beside him, tears streaming down her face. Layla looked at them and smiled. My mother once denied me, but her denial did not destroy me. It shaped me into the woman I am today. And now I stand as proof that even in rejection, there is resilience. Even in pain, there is power. The crowd rose in a standing ovation. And for the first time in her life, Layla felt whole, not because her mother finally claimed her, but because she had claimed herself.